Welcome, everyone. This should be filtering in. We'll give folks just another minute and then we will get going. And feel free, you're welcome to turn your camera on. Everyone will be muted for the first part of the discussion here, but it's always good to see familiar faces.
I want to be wherever Pat is. I like that. I look like it was a nice. It looks a little cooler than down here in Texas.
All right, people will continue to trickle in as we go, but in the interest of time, I will go ahead and kick us off. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for the first of what I hope will be a series of these nationwide Principles First presidential town halls. I'm Heath Mayo. I'm the founder of Principles First. And I see a lot of familiar faces on the line, but also a lot of new faces. So if you are new, we welcome you and are really glad that you've engaged with us this evening. Principles First, if you're not familiar with us, is a national grassroots group focused on putting principles at the center of our politics again, instead of personalities. I think that's something that we've lost in our politics, certainly in the last few years, and it's something that Principles First is very interested in correcting. We've been at this now, I think, since about 2019, and we do a lot of different things throughout the year, but the one main thing that we do is we hold the Principles First Summit in early March in Washington each year. It convenes thought leaders and thinkers around these core principles to discuss them and talk about the future of our country. And it's a really great time. If you haven't attended, I encourage you to look into it and join us next year if you can. Another thing about us, we're entirely grassroots, volunteer-driven organization. Everything that Principles First does happens because of the sweat and the creativity of our members. So I want to thank everybody who continues to contribute to the group and make it such a rewarding and valuable thing to be a part of. And obviously, part of what is so exciting about our group is that we get to hear from leaders like the one we have here this evening. I'm delighted to have him here, and I know many of you are as well. His name is Mr. Will Hurd, and for over 2 decades, he has been involved in some of the most pressing national security issues challenging our country. From the front lines in hostile foreign countries as a CIA officer, in boardrooms of some of our, leading businesses, and then in the halls of Congress as a member of Congress legislating to address the challenges that we face. He was a congressman from the border areas of Texas. He's 45 years old, making him one of the youngest candidates in the race. And if you've heard him speak or read his recent book, American Reboot, you know that he himself is very much an advocate of solutions, ideas, really figuring out the question of how we really make America stronger and as good as it can be. And so with that, I will, Will, thank you for being here, and I will turn it over to you.
Hey, Heath, thank you. I didn't know this was the first one. Put all that pressure on me to set the right tone. And just for the record, Amy gets to ask the first question since she's reading American Reboot. So thanks for that, Amy. Look, I'm going to do something that I wasn't prepared to do. I'm going to talk about what my principles are, and thank y'all for participating in this and caring. Quick background. I'm a mama's boy, right? I was a baby of 3. Actually, I don't know if y'all can see, that's me right there. I always tell people, my head has been this size since I was 4 years old, and this is confirmation there. I got made fun of. I had messed up teeth. I had a speech impediment until I was in high school. I wore a size 14 shoe when I was in the 5th grade, right? And I hate saying this. I know we're recording, but if you can bleep this part out, Heath, I would appreciate it. My last name rhymes with nerd, right? And so I got picked on a lot. And that's why one of the first things for me, I don't like bullies, man. I just can't handle it, because I know what it was like, at least when I was in school. At 3:45, when school was over, the bullying stopped. And now what kids have to deal with is just crazy. And to me, when adults get involved in this, it's just unacceptable. So as a youth, I learned not to bully. I also learned early on as a kid, don't lie. I was lucky to grow up in the 80s. I'm actually gonna be 46 in a couple of weeks. It was great growing up in the 80s. It was like the best, like the cartoon. It was like the cartoon golden age, right? And I loved GoBots. And I remember one time telling my dad I want a GoBot. He's like, "You ain't getting no GoBot." And I basically, make a long story short, went out and wrote with a rock on the top of his company car, "I want GoBot," right? And my dad came back and told me, "Did you do this?" And I said, "Well, I thought it was a piece of dirt," right? And I lied. And the thing was, my dad wasn't upset with me writing on his car. He was upset that I lied about that. And to me, that is something that stuck with me. I was lucky in to get exposed to some amazing people when I was in high school. It got me excited about computer science, decided to study that at Texas A&M University. And for those that know us Aggies, we have a phrase: Aggies do not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do. And that just kind of reinforced those principles that I learned as a kid. I had never been outside of Texas for most of my life. In my freshman year, we got Mary Beth from H-Town. Good to have you on. I had never really been outside of Texas, and I'm walking across campus freshman year, and I see a sign to take 2 journalism classes in Mexico City for $425. I had $450 from working in a computer lab, and decided to go to Mexico. Fell in love being in another culture, and that's what started my interest in foreign policy. Added international as a minor. First class I took had a CIA tough guy, and he told me the most amazing stories, and that's where I went to the CIA when I graduated. I was in India for 2 years, Pakistan 2 years, Afghanistan for 1.5 years. My job was to stop terrorists from blowing up the homeland, to prevent Russian spies and Chinese spies from stealing our secrets, and to put nuclear weapons proliferators out of business. Best job on the planet, but I had to brief members of Congress, and I was pretty shocked by the caliber I elected of leaders. So I decided to run for Congress. But here's one of the other principles I learned in the CIA. We don't get to say no. If the president comes to you and says, "Hey, these dirtbags over here are going to try to blow something up, we need to do something," the answer is not, "Sorry, boss, we don't have enough time. Sorry, boss, we don't have enough money. Sorry, boss, we don't have enough people." The answer is yes, and go do it. And so that ethos of being able to get things done, right, despite insurmountable odds, was a lesson that I took away and has been ingrained in my head. And so I ran for office, lost the first election by 700 votes. Glad I don't want to tell that story anymore. But then I helped build a cybersecurity company where we broke into banks, stole their money, show them how we did it. And the opportunity came to run. Again, I took it. I was in Congress 6 years. Nobody thought a Black Republican could win in a 72% Latino district. And here's how I did. I showed up to places that people didn't expect me to be. I talked about things people didn't expect me to talk about. And over my time winning and running and being in office, I learned another principle. Way more unites us than divides us as a country. If we focus on those things, right, we can be solving a whole lot more problems. I decided to walk away after 3 terms, 6 years. I told people, guess what? You don't have to die or be defeated to leave Congress. And so I was able to become a managing director at an investment bank called Allen & Company, where I've helped technology companies grow and that had a national security application. I've been on the board of OpenAI. Most of y'all may not know the name OpenAI, but you know ChatGPT. We're the ones that created ChatGPT. And working with these cutting edge technology companies, here's something I've learned. We can take advantage of technology before it takes advantage of us. Right. But if we don't start making moves, then we're going to be in trouble. And ultimately, one of the reasons why I decided to walk away from a job I was getting paid a lot of money at, I've been married for 7 months. My wife's like on board with this, is because we're faced with a number of generational defining challenges. Whether it's the Chinese government trying to surpass us as a global superpower, whether it's this fact that cost of goods and services are increasing 3 times the price of average income at a time when technologies like AI is going to upend every industry, not in a decade, but in a couple of years. And we all know and been seeing how our grades for our kids in math, science, and reading are the lowest they've been in this century. These are major problems that need to be addressed. I've been sick and tired of having our elected officials lie to us. Let's have a competition of ideas, because the thing I've learned, it's not a fait accompli that this experiment called America is going to last for another 247 years. We have to work at it. And I still think we have the greatest chance. And the only way we're going to do it is if we do it together. We're better together. Every major thing that's ever passed, we've done it together. And Heath, I'll stop there and tell everybody thanks for your time. Sorry I went on a little too long, but thanks for being here.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks. And then just to do a little bit of housekeeping, we'll have a conversation, Will and I will, and then, towards the end, last 15 minutes or so, we'll sort of open it up and start to take questions from the group. Will, so that was a great sort of just survey of who you are as a leader and what you're focused on. I want to start with foreign policy. Actually, I mean, it's one of your fortes. You maybe arguably more than anyone else in the race. You have a depth of expertise and experience here that I think is really interesting and valuable. And it's arguably one of the bigger substantive flashpoints right now in the race. Mm-hmm. There really appear to be two distinct camps of candidates, those that see what's happening in Ukraine and see clear American interests at stake and the value of supporting Ukraine and their defense against Putin. And then another camp who is sort of the polar opposite. They think they could care less. We're distracting ourselves from domestic issues or China. What should America's posture be towards the war in Ukraine? Why does it matter? And how do we think about it vis-a-vis China?
Sure. So first off, I wish more of my what's the right word? Competitors were more focused on stopping war criminals like Vladimir Putin than causing drama and hating on my friends in the LGBTQ community. But here's how we need to understand and think about Ukraine. Starts with the United States of America built an international order that benefits us since World War II. And when we don't defend that international order, it affects us. And so the fact that we have spent about 5% of DoD budget helping Ukrainians since February, we have demolished demolish is the wrong word, that's hyperbolic. We have eroded the Russian military without having to send any of our sons and daughters, spouses, moms or dads, right? That's a pretty good deal. And if Ukraine does not win, and let me start this way, if Ukraine loses, Russia's not going to stop. There are still 3 other countries that were part of the USSR that is now part of NATO. They will not stop. And then the potential for Article 5 getting invoked at some point increases if we don't have Ukrainians win this war. And when I say win the war, it's push the Russians out of all of Ukraine, to include Crimea and the Donbass. We should have been helping the Ukrainians back in 2014. We should have been giving the Ukrainians all the help and support they needed now, before the invasion of Moscow. And the way we prevent this war from becoming a forever war is making sure they have all the support they need. I think to be even as aggressive as helping them establish no-fly zones around Ukraine in order to take away that Russian advantage. That's with equipment and material, and also helping our NATO allies move in that direction. Now, how does this impact China? If we do not help the Ukrainians, Eastern Europe is going to say, forget about Western Europe and NATO, and they're going to start paying attention and working with the Russians again. And then Western Europe is going to say, hey, we can't trust when we can't bet on the Americans, so they're going to start cooperating with the Chinese. And the best example that scares me about this was, maybe it was 2 months ago, President Macron from France was in Beijing, and he was talking to an American newspaper and he said, hey, America, don't make us, France, choose. Don't make us choose between the United States and China, because you're not going to like the answer. So The Chinese are watching how we are responding. One of their takeaways from Ukraine is you got to go in heavy. They did not think that the Russians went in and they thought that the Russians miscalculated the resolve of the Ukrainians. The Chinese will not do that with Taiwan. They know the sophistication and the difficulty of trying to take the Taiwan island. The Chinese also know that by about 2027, if they don't move with hard power, then they're never going to be able to take over Taiwan. They're also waiting until 2027 because we have elections in Taiwan in 2026. So the Chinese government, let me be clear, and I've gone on too long, Heath. I apologize. Cut in if I'm talking too much. But here is the issue with the Chinese government. They're trying to surpass us as a global superpower. That's not my opinion. That's what they've said about themselves in English since at least 2015. And they're going to do that by being a global leader in a number of advanced technologies, 5G, AI, quantum, hypersonics, a number of these things. And so the Chinese and Taiwan's an important part of that. So this is how all of this is connected. And it's a very simple principle. Since we're all principles first, my principle on this, and what's what I've learned being connected to national security for 22 years, your friend should love you and your enemy should fear you.
Well, you hit a lot of the follow-up questions I had, but I want to just maybe step back on the Chinese question for a second. You know, there's some debate as to how imminent the threat is from China, whether it would be a hot threat or is it just an economic threat. You know, people like to talk about Xi Jinping and China as if it is a juggernaut. You know, Donald Trump practically gushes over Xi. But really, I mean, China also by some measures has a lot of challenges to address. You know, their birth rates are declining, economic growth is stalling. Do you see, I mean, do you think the military threat, particularly to Taiwan, is imminent as folks as imminent as folks like to suggest? And how would a Hurd administration engage with China? Should we be reaching out? Is Biden administration, you know, they've engaged China to some degree. There was a sort of a hiatus after the balloon, but should we be doing more to interact with China, or what's the Hurd administration's approach?
So the first thing you got to start with is what is the best outcome, right? And outcome number one is the United States of America stays the global superpower, period, full stop. And we can do that and coexist with China at the same time. And the best thing, the way to describe China, make him a frenemy. You agree on some things and you disagree on others. But in order to do that, in order to negotiate with the Chinese from a position of strength, you got to show you got a posse with you. And so when Janet Yellen went to Beijing, if you're talking, you're not fighting, I think that's good. But guess what? Stop in Paris, stop in London, go to Tokyo, then show up to Beijing and be like, hey, I talked to all my crew and we're all singing off the same sheet of music, right? And so the other thing that we've seen, the Chinese government over the last 12 months, we've seen an increase in the number of zero-day cyber attacks that have been attributable to the Chinese government. And a zero-day cyber attack is the most sophisticated kind of attack there is. It is taking advantage of some a flaw in software that nobody else knows. We've seen an increase in the number of those attacks being used by the Chinese, attributable to the Chinese, and guess where they were being directed at? The defense industrial base of the United States of America. So what is the consequences to this? Now, in old school, you know, Cold War, and you caught a Russian stealing some secrets from America, what would you do? You'd ban the ambassador, right? But in this case, we need to be doing things in concert with our allies and making sure that we're all singing off the same sheet of music, and not just Europe. Why is China able to increase its footprint in Cuba? It's real simple. Multiple administrations, I would say at least 3 administrations in the United States, failed to get the Western Hemisphere on board with addressing Cuba. Most people don't realize this. Cuban policy is actually codified in the law. The embargo on Cuba was actually passed. It was in 92 and 96. It was called the Libertad Act, and it codifies how the embargo can be lifted, right? And so what we failed to do since 1992 is get the rest of the Western Hemisphere on board with a policy on how to deal with Cuba. Now nobody cares about the damn embargo except for the United States, and that's why China has increased their footprint. Why should we care about that? A little thing called hypersonics. Hypersonics are advanced weapons that move at Mach 5. We have no counter to a hypersonic missile. We do not know how to shoot down. There are some companies that are working on this, but we do not have any anti-missile capabilities to shoot down Mach 5. Mach 5 based in Havana could get to Miami within it's about 3.5 minutes, and a missile can get to DC in under 14 minutes, right? So again, a Hurd administration would be dealing with our partners, right? And then when it comes to technology, we would see the public sector and the private sector work a little bit closer. Everybody's talking about semiconductors now, right? Goes back to China, and Heath, interrupt me there. I'm going to go on a run.
I think, yeah, no, this is good, and it gets to some of the questions that are coming into the chat, and shifts towards, I think, a domestic policy question, is because, you know, I think a lot of our partners abroad look skeptically now at America, question our resolve in engaging with them globally. And one way we have sort of retreated, particularly under the Trump administration, was through tariffs and trade policy. And that was sort of the place I wanted to start with domestic policy.
Sure.
Trump's tariffs, TPP vis-a-vis China, was that a mistake to disengage from the world that way?
Absolutely, it was a mistake. Not only did we disengage from our allies in Asia, we let the Chinese government get in. That's crazy. And when you look at some of the counter tariffs that happened, it decimated a lot of American agriculture, which caused the government to have to do bailouts, right? Sorghum is gone. And here's what happens. When you change global supply chains, they don't whip back once those tariffs get lifted. So yes, it was an absolute mistake pulling away from TPP. It was, and we should be figuring out how we can improve trade with our allies.
Why is this a bipartisan problem, do you think? I mean, I've been surprised to see the Biden administration basically leave the Trump policies in place. I mean, the Trump tariffs are all basically still there. I mean, is it just politics?
Well, listen to Stephen, Bernie Sanders, so it is this notion that imports are necessarily bad, right? Guess what? I'm from San Antonio, Texas. Any of y'all rolling around in a Toyota Tundra? That sucker is built here. There we go. Lisa's got a Toyota Tundra. You're welcome. It was built here in my hometown of San Antonio, Texas, right? Toyota supplies and has jobs for thousands of people in San Antonio. The economic benefits of that, there's parts and manufacturing that comes from the United States. Like the fact that we have gotten to a point where we're like, free trade is bad. Like this notion that when NAFTA came up, yes, NAFTA impacted jobs, there's no question about it. I represent a town called El Paso. El Paso was decimated, new jobs were created. The NAFTA increased the US, Mexican, and Canadian economies by 400%. That's a pretty good deal. And so part of our foreign policy should be about how do we further the economic advantage of the United States. When we rebuilt Europe after World War II, we helped get trading partners that allowed us to have half of global GDP. And so that's why when you look at the One Belt, One Road initiative by the Chinese government, how they're investing in places, why are we not countering that? And why are we not providing, be like, hey, being our friend comes with a whole lot of bennies, right? And we would be able to help, and that also benefits our economy. So these things are interconnected, and making sure that we're strengthening ties with our allies, we would be in a better position.
Another aspect of trade, I think, is labor, and immigration is actually, I think, it's a trade issue to some extent, but it's its own distinct, it has its own distinct set of challenges. You lived in South Texas for a good part of your life. You represented most of those communities that sit along the border in Texas. Why is border security such a perennial issue that it almost never seems to get solved? Both sides talk about it and then nobody ever does anything. And what are sort of the quick wins that a Hurd administration can put on the board to stop the flow of fentanyl, stop unlawful entries, but also set up a system to where we start to handle these folks in a more humane way?
Sure. Well, Heath, I got high blood pressure. Thanks for getting my blood pressure up even higher. This is one of those issues, and ultimately the problem is Republicans and Democrats would rather use this issue of immigration as a political bludgeon than actually solve the problem. And so what needs to be done? What's happening at the border is indeed a crisis, and I saw somebody was saying that things are down right now. They are down because it's 115 degrees outside in South Texas, right? That is normal. That is the normal pattern that you see as things are now. But if you look, since the Biden administration came in office, 5.5 million people have come into this country illegally. Most of them, if not all of them, have used a human smuggler. On average, that's about $10,000. So human smuggling networks in Latin America, $55 billion. Right, that's illegal. 5.5 is illegal. So to put that number in context, the entire U.S. intelligence budget is $60 billion. So what is step one? Step one, stop treating everybody that's coming to the United States of America illegally as an asylum seeker. Asylum is real. Asylum is needed. But when you treat everybody like asylum seeker, you hurt the people that actually need this, right? Now, this crisis began under Donald Trump. And it's gotten worse under Joe Biden because Donald Trump is the one that started treating everybody as an asylum seeker. Stop doing that. Work with our ally countries on creating processing centers to make it easier to deport people back to their home country. We've seen this happen multiple times where we're able to help those countries with their own citizens. Also, we talked about foreign aid. It's a fraction of the cost to solve the problem over there before it gets to our shores. So addressing some of the root causes, violence, lack of economic opportunity, and extreme poverty in key areas like the Northern Triangle. Historically, the Northern Triangle, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, has been what has fueled most of illegal immigration, and Mexico at times. But right now, it's coming from everywhere. But still addressing and mirroring our foreign aid with our national security strategy so that we have 10-year regional plans in some of these areas to address those root cause. When it comes to actual border security, there are mile-by-mile assessments of all 2,000 miles, of the border, 1,200 miles in Texas. And there's mile-by-mile assessment. We know which tool to use, whether it's a physical barrier, technology. In some places in West Texas, the Chihuahuan Desert, you can see for 100 miles, but it takes Border Patrol hours or days to respond to a threat. So you need technology. So that's how we actually secure the actual border, and then streamline legal immigration. It starts with DACA, right? These DACA kids, they're not kids anymore. I shouldn't say that. These are people that have only known the United States of America as their home. The stats are crazy. Like 92% of them are either starting a business in school or in the military. Make sure there's a legal pathway for DACA kids. And then if the Chinese government's going to steal our secrets, let's steal their engineers. If you're a quantum engineer, if you're an AI engineer, and you go to Texas A&M University or University of Texas or Stanford or wherever, ITT Tech, I don't care, and you're going to be a productive member of our society, let's make sure you can work in jobs here. The United States of America created basically the Silicon Valley. It's an area called Waterloo in Canada. They created the Waterloo. And they are, because people could not stay, that were graduating from schools in the United States of America, could not stay and get jobs because they couldn't get visas. And so they went to Canada. That's nuts, right? And if you're going to be a productive member of our society, let's get you here quickly. So those are the things that can be done. There is a bill, by the way, it's called the USA Act of 2018, that if it would have been brought to the floor of the House, would have gotten bipartisan support. And we had 58 senators. This was a bill that was created by, it was a bipartisan bill. Pete Aguilar, Democrat from California, and this tall, dark, and handsome guy from South Texas named Will Hurd. We were the two that worked on that. And so anyway, like all of these things are solvable and solutions, and that's how I would cut it up.
Great. Last one on domestic policy. Two things that politicians in both parties rarely want to talk about: debt and entitlements. You see this one starting to creep back into the conversation a little bit. It seems to always do, just for just enough to where people say, what are you doing? Why are you talking about that? But again, seems to be divergent views in the party. You know, I think the new wing of there's one wing that says, what are you doing? Don't talk about those things. It's not politically popular. It's not populist. Let's just continue to finance this stuff however we can. And then there's another segment that says, you know, let's start to look at these things and make things solvent. Where do you stand in that? Do you think there's a way to make these things solvent and extend these programs and while also bringing down our debt and deficits?
The short answer is yes, there's a way. And look, if we do nothing, these programs aren't going to be around. Right. And so doing nothing is not an option. Look, it's what is that? Pathak was right. You know, there have been a number of studies that have been done by retired elected officials that have been R&D that have come up with a number of solutions on how do you make this available. Do not touch it for current seniors anywhere near seniors. Right. That has to be a major principle, but there are steps that can be taken to make sure that this exists for those that need it going forward. And it's tied to broader fiscal policy and how do we get our own house in order. And Heath, I'm gonna get a little wonky here if I haven't already gotten wonky. Everybody knows this, right? Everybody knows this phrase, and it blows me away that everybody knows this. I don't care if you're a rancher in West Texas or a farmer in the North Country of New Hampshire. When it comes to federal government spending, if you don't use it, everybody mouth it. You lose it, right? Like the fact that we have that principle, that means that we do not have the right incentive structure in government when it comes to spending people's hard-earned taxpayer dollars. One way you can get rid of that is create a 2 or a 4-year budget. I actually think a 4-year appropriation cycle is the way to go, because then you have one administration that's able to have a level of consistency, and if you save money, you're not going to be impacted by that. Congress is never going to go for that. Appropriators are never going to go for that. But when two of my going to 2 years is possible. So for the life of a Congress, right? So that is one way how we can start working on dealing with the costs of the federal government. We can address some of the federal deficit and to help bend back some of the issues on the national debt.
Yep.
But those are some of the steps that we would have to take in order to do that. And we need a president that recognizes fiscal policy is as important as monetary policy when it comes time to addressing some of these broader issues.
Right. So I want to shift gears now. You are running for president. It's a political race. And so we have to go there. The elephant in the primary is obviously Donald Trump, who appears to be doubling down on every absurd, crazy thing that he's ever uttered and lie that he said to the American people that caused them to reject him in 2020. I don't know why he thinks it will be any different in 2024. As you go around and talk to Republicans, people who are still, a lot of people on this call are, questioning, or if they haven't already, questioning their, a lot of us are former Republicans or current Republicans, but, a lot of us are upset with the direction the party has taken. When you go around to these rooms and you talk to Republicans, why are people still hooked on this guy? And what is it going to take? I mean, what can you do? What can we do to sort of pull them back to reality, if that's even possible?
So look, the most important thing to me, if we want to be done with Donald Trump, he has to be beat in a primary, period, full stop. And I know, and Heath, I'm not watching all the chats, but man, 63, y'all are a chatty bunch. So the the reality is there are more people that do not like Donald Trump than like Donald Trump. When you look at some of these national polling, we all know this: running for president is not one election, it's 50 elections, right? And when you look at some of the statewide stuff, based on who's voting, and you start doing voter ID is when you're talking about talking to hundreds of thousands of people, not 800, right? You can see that Donald Trump has between 27 and 32% of the electorate, right? That's going to be pretty hard. That means there's a lot of folks that aren't. So what is this going to require? And I know I saw some of the chat say there's some Democrats and independents. We need more people voting in primaries. Full stop. 23% of Americans vote in primaries, right? That means 77% think everybody's a bunch of jokers and thinks it's a waste of their time. So we need to make sure that we're getting the message out to them. Quick math session. Last Congress, 92% of House seats were decided in a primary. 66,000 people voted on average in contested primary. So that comes down to 33,001 people decided 92% of the seats. And that's only 3% of the population in a congressional district. This is the trend that we have. So we need people getting engaged. Look, we need people that are talking about these issues to be on debate stage. One of the things that I'm hoping with this group here, y'all go to hurdforamerica.com, give me at least $1 to help me get on the debate stage and make sure that these kinds of debates are happening, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. And if you want to give $2, make sure it's your spouse that's giving one of the dollars, and you give another, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so this is so it's winnable, and it's not a fait accompli that Donald Trump is a nominee. Yes, we know there's going to be another indictment that comes down potentially as early as Thursday. But we need to make sure that we're supporting folks and engaging in primaries and spreading the word of people that are saying, hey, enough is enough. And you're right, Heath. A Republican has not won the national popular vote in 20 years. Donald Trump lost the House in 2018. He lost the Senate and the White House in 2020. He prevented a red wave from coming forward. The lesson of the 2020 election is don't be a jerk and don't be a socialist. The lesson of the 2022 election was candidates matter. And so the country is ready. 6 out of 10 voters do not want Donald Trump to be the nominee, and 7 out of 10 voters do not want Joe Biden to be a nominee or president, excuse me. So that's a lot of bipartisan support of doing things different. That's why I'm running. That's why I'm trying to build a momentum, because when I'm out there slapping backs and kissing babies, what I'm hearing is from people like folks on here that we want principled leadership. We want a competition of ideas. We're better together. Way more unites us than divides us. Let's solve these problems so the rest of this century stays the American century. That's what I'm hearing on the street. And
just so everyone on the call knows, you're a no on the pledge, right? In terms of supporting.
I am a no. I am a no on the pledge. And look, the reason is it's not about not supporting the Republican nominee. I'm not going to support Donald Trump. And I took one oath when I joined the CAA, and that was to protect and defend the Constitution. I take one pledge. That's when I put my hand on my heart and pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. And 7 months ago, I took an oath to this beautiful woman right here. If y'all can see that, I took a pledge to her, and that's it. I'm going to keep it at that. And I can't lie to get access to a microphone, because again, we go back to those first principles: be honest, and an Aggie can't lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do.
Right. And I do want to, before we leave the Trump question, one of your decisions that I think many on this call are interested to hear from you kind of directly on is your vote on the first Trump impeachment for his conditioning aid to Ukraine, for dirt on Joe Biden. This was sort of, the facts of this were outlined in the Mueller report. You voted against that impeachment.
Yeah.
In hindsight, do you regret that vote? And if not, can you just walk us through the principles and the reasoning that guided your decision there?
Sure. No, I don't regret any decision I've made when I was in Congress, and here's why. My baseline for impeachment was a violation of the law. When I first ran for office, as running in the Republican primary, people were asking me, "Are you going to impeach Barack Hussein Obama when you get into office?" And I'm like, "For what?" Right? And it was like, I forget what it was, everything from the craziness about where he was born to whatever the issue of the day was. And that's where my standard for impeachment was a violation of the law. And so I was on the committee, the Intel committee. Look, Kevin McCarthy tried to get me to get off. And because he knew I was one of the few people that were going to be like, I'm going to listen. I'm going to review. I'm going to take, I was open. And ultimately the question was, and this is what Adam Schiff put forward, was this not fraud, but a quid pro quo, in essence, whatever the appropriate legal bribery or extortion, right? The preconditions for bribery and extortion did not exist in this moment. When Donald Trump called Zelensky did not know, and nobody in the government knew that there was aid being withheld. And so the preconditions for those things did not exist. Did I think what Donald Trump did on that call was bonehead and dumb? 100%. But I never saw impeachment as a political move. It was as a violation of the law. And that's why I made the decision that I made, and I'm sticking with it.
Great. So and then let's fast forward to impeachment number 2. By then you were then out of Congress, but on January 6th you tweeted, and I got to quote this because I looked it up. That you said this on January 6th was pretty remarkable. "This isn't a peaceful protest. This is an attack on our democracy and domestic terrorism to try to stop certifying elections. This should be treated as a coup led by a president that will not be peacefully removed from power." Now, those, I got to say, are some of the clearest words condemning what happened that day, particularly contemporaneous to them occurring. Given what had you been in Congress that day, was that an impeachable offense on January 6th?
Yeah, and it was, because there was a violation of law, in my opinion.
Right.
And that's what was clear. And you can even take it further. When he called my man Rappersberger in Atlanta and was like, find me some votes, right? Like, that was a clear, he knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew that it didn't exist. And so to me, that is what was clear on that. And then, you're the one that tells everybody to show up on January 6th. You tell them to go march down there and basically hang Mike Pence in order to keep me in office, right? The evidence there on committing a crime was pretty clear. I think the January 6th, what the January 6th committee found was supportive of that. So in that case, even though I wasn't in office, to me met my threshold of what is a violation of the law.
Great. And I've got time for one more for us, then we'll open it up. And if you have a question, just raise your hand, and then I'll call on folks. But I want to wrap by giving you a chance to sort of talk about the race as it exists and as you see it. As I already said, I think there are a lot of very fundamental disagreements substantively between the candidates that are in this race.
Sure.
There's not a lot of lanes, but there are certainly disagreements over fundamental things. It's still early. there are also already signs that previously strong candidates are already faltering. I'm thinking here of the DeSantis campaign, and others sort of are still in the starting blocks where people thought that they'd be a little further down the road. How do you see that in terms of an opportunity for the Hurd campaign? And how do you see your chances going forward? And how do you propel your momentum to kind of insert yourself into those gaps that some of those other campaigns are leaving?
Heath, you're being polite and basically I'm a dark horse, right? And I recognize that. But here's how a dark horse like me wins. We're a startup company, and this is about building momentum and scaling at the right time. The way you win a campaign is real simple, and that's ID your voters and turn them out. And when I talk to you about, we have a very granular understanding in every state, what is the pro-Trump support at an individual level, not on a macro level, but at an individual level. And we know the number of people that do not like Donald Trump will never vote for a clone of Donald Trump. And then everybody else in between who may have voted for Donald Trump twice, but recognizes he has way too much baggage and they're looking for an alternative. And so that is the lane. We're living off the land. I'm spending a lot of time in places like New Hampshire in order to bring this message. And here's what I'm learning. It's resonating with people. I talk about how are we going to, make sure our kids are reading right? How do we make sure that we take advantage of technology before it takes advantage of us? How are we going to make sure that we deal with these 23 years of increasing costs faster than average wages? And so it resonates. And so one of the best things a group like this can do, and I know somebody said, hey, they could still vote for Joe Biden. That's fine. Let's have a competition of ideas. You can still make sure that you have somebody else on the other side of the debate stage that is someone that cares about the country, is looking forward to the country, and has principles first, right? And so that's the lane for someone like me, and that's what we're going to take advantage of. And again, I can't stress enough. We are not to the 40,000 individual donors goal yet. I need all the help I can get. If y'all are able to help with that, that goes a long way. Hurdforamerica.com, HURD. And that's one way to make sure these voices are being heard. We got 26 weeks for the first election. A lot can change in that time. And so how do you make sure you're building an organization that can scale? And that's what we're working on.
Great. I'll hand it to Tom Nally in Cyprus. I see your hand raised, Tom, if you want to unmute yourself, and there you go.
That and lead off, sweet. Congressman Hurd, thank you very much for taking some time for us tonight. Greatly appreciate it. My question, I wanted to look maybe a little bit beyond presidential politics, and it's really concerning young conservatives and the youth. One of my big concerns is that when you look at young voters on college campuses, they're confusing national populism with conservatism, seeing Donald Trump and not Ronald Reagan or George H.W. Bush or frankly Will Hurd as a conservative role model. What can we do to win back those young voters and help them see the light away from populism and back towards conservatism?
Sure. Look, it's a great question. And I will say this, I try to spend a lot of time on college campuses. And by doing that, by giving people another example, oftentimes when I'm there, a lot of people want to come and eyeball the Black Republican. They're kind of like frowny face and be like, who is this guy? And you gotta deal with that. But here's what I found. What I love about Gen Z, they don't believe anybody. Right? They're suspicious. All those parents and grandparents are shaking their heads on this call, right? They don't believe anybody. And that's what I love about them. And so one of the things that we have to do is show up and engage with them. And here's where young conservatives, I don't care where they fall on the line, you got to be talking about climate. And people understand that. They appreciate that climate change is real. Humans are having an impact on our environment, but we can address that issue and also continue energy independence and keep our economy humming. We can do all of these things at the same time. And that's an issue that you have to talk about. I was just at Dartmouth, talking about AI. First question was on climate. And again, I had these, I had dinner with about 30 of these kids. And look, it's as simple as showing up and engaging them. I was a fellow, sorry, and Heath, I'll keep my answers tight so we can get some more questions, but I was a fellow at University of Chicago. Love the interaction with these students, and it's not being afraid to answer questions. It's that simple. We got to show up.
Great. Mary Beth, I see your hands raised if you want to unmute.
I think that last question captured a lot of mine. So I guess I'll just add, because I really think the most important thing for the country is to have a healthy right side of the political spectrum, and telling kids, showing my age, that, what conservatism is. And it's not pointing to Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, but to a Will Hurd and saying, this is how the other side looks at it, and there are other ways to get to problem solving. I guess just the other question I would have is, do you need volunteers to call to do anything? I've got time on my hands and would love to do more.
Look, absolutely. Again, thank you, Stephen and Mary Beth. Hurd for Congress. Hurd for Congress. I'm still getting that out of my head. Hurdforamerica.com. There's a place to highlight that. One of the things we also need now is understanding, contacts in New Hampshire, right? People that are willing, because part of this is engaging groups that haven't been engaged. We know where all the regular groups are, but we're working with folks, that are unique, and so that's something that can be helpful. And so if you send an email through the website, I see those things, and so I need an army.
I'd be happy to go to New Hampshire. I was there for the No Labels event. Thank you for what you're doing. You're giving me hope.
David McGraw, I see your hand raised.
Hello, Mr. Hurd. Thank you for doing this
Hey,
with us. I appreciate having a chance to talk to you. I wanted
1 second, David. I just saw one of my old interns, Amelia. Hey, girl. Good to see you. Thanks for being on. She was awesome and helped me wrap up the old 23rd. So sorry, David. Go ahead.
Yeah. So whenever one party wins the presidency, there's 45 to 50 million Americans that feel like they're not represented. So I wanted to know what concessions you're willing to make to the left to make everybody kind of feel that you represent them.
Look, when concessions is a very specific word, but I do what I've always done, right? Like my job, I always said I was a representative. I didn't say I was a congressman. I said I was a representative, and I represent everyone. People that voted for me, people that didn't vote for me, people that didn't vote. And so part of this is engaging on some of these issues that matter. And so look, the problem with how our government operates now, specifically Congress negotiates through subtraction, not addition. What do I mean by that? Someone puts out some major policy, like these are the 100 things we need in a bill. And you're not going to get those 100 freaking things. Okay. We should start with, this is the one thing we want to do. And the other side says, hey, well, those one things equal these two things. And you're like, well, we got to add these other two things. And then you build up to 9 things. And so you feel like you've won something. So part of my negotiation style is saying, hey, what is the objective you're trying to achieve? And how are you going to make sure you get the votes necessary? And ultimately, thinking that you can pass legislation with your own party is, I think, the biggest fallacy happening in Washington, D.C., probably over the last 12 years. And so a concession would ultimately be engaging with my Democratic colleagues on some of the things that matters.
Right. And I got to go to
question, David.
I got to go to Tom Logan next, because it appears that he may be in Tokyo and has to get credit just for doing the time change.
Yes, good morning. It's not an odd hour here, fortunately. Congressman, very best wishes to you on your run for president.
Thanks,
I appreciated your comments at the top on IT, technology, and also foreign policy. I just grabbed this off the newsstands this morning in Tokyo. Yeah. It's Toyo Keizai, very in-depth. It's similar to our Business Week, and it's on all the Chat GPT issues. But my question really is on North Korea, which was really believe it or not, was the reason I left the Republican Party after 48 years. I walked precincts for Barry Goldwater as a kid in '64. I was in the Nixon campaign as a YVP in '72. I was in Reagan's think tank out in Santa Monica before the '80 race, and then was a surrogate speaker for Governor Reagan in the '80 campaign. So I go way back. I had 3 years on Congressman Bob Dornan's staff, conservative. But I just watched the whole North Korean situation erode under the previous president and get nothing in return. So if you have some comments on anything you might approach, it seemed his approach was golf courses on their East Coast, photo ops, okay, giving Kim Jong-un joyrides in the Beast and Air Force One, and all this bloviating, but nothing about true denuclearization or liberation of the Christians in concentration camps. I just so fed up, and I may very well return to the Republican Party after hearing you this morning. That's it.
Well, Tom, you can make an interim step before returning to the party. You can donate and vote for one Republican, and then you can go from there. That's how you're, that'll be your gateway drug. I don't know if that's an appropriate joke. I apologize. Look, when it comes to North Korea, Kim Jong-un is interested in staying in power, period, full stop. Right. And we need to be making sure that the South Koreans and the Japanese and the Australians, that we're all on board. This is actually one area where we could potentially cooperate with the Chinese government on, because the Chinese government is not interested in a war happening between North and South Korea, because that would end up about 1 million North Koreans, refugees on their border. And the Chinese government knows that they can't, consume that, right? And so part of this is a undeniable cooperation between the South Koreans and showing that we have their support, and making sure that whoever's in power in South Korea, that they're taking the lead in kind of these negotiations. Also, when it comes to their nuclear stores, making sure the Chinese government are working to prevent them from getting some of the equipment and weaponry that they ultimately need. And so this is one of the trickier issues, in my opinion, around the world, because neither side is going to rest until there's something about reunification. And I don't know where we can go there. But it starts with having our friends back and being clear of what our red lines are when it comes to North Korea. And guess what? Don't kiss his butt and think that we can charm him.
Great.
Thanks for the question, Tom. And Tom, I'd love to hear more. I'd love to hear more about your position, since you've got you got experience there. Can take a picture of that bumper sticker and tag me on social media.
Great. We're running a little short on time.
Sorry, Heath. I'm taking too much time. Joking around.
No, this is great. One or two more, maybe. I see Amelia's hand raised. Amelia, if you want to ask your question.
Sure. Hello. It's very good to see you. I had a wonderful time interning in your office. So glad to see you're making your way to
I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to stop that, Amelia. Keep going.
Okay, great. All right, I'll stop. So to stay on the nuclear negotiation kind of topic in general, and to also switch back to foreign policy, there's been news in the last couple of months of quote unquote quiet negotiations between the Biden administration and Iran over kind of renewed nuclear negotiations and trying to get some of the Americans over their back. And there's been sort of some debate over whether there's going to be a new JCPOA. So 5 years out from the collapse of that agreement, do you have any thoughts on the future of those negotiations, kind of, what our stance should be, where we should go going forward?
Sure, Amelia. Thanks for the question. Look, so one of the concerns right now with all the issues that are happening in Israel, based on their recent decision impacting their courts and the chaos that's creating in Israel, does this give the Iranians an opportunity? Because the real check on Iran was always going to be Israel will not allow them to get beyond a certain level of enriching uranium. And if they did, we know the Israelis would attack. This current détente between the Iranians and the Saudis is a little concerning. Folks that I know that I go to for on the ground truth in that region, they don't think it will last. They think it's almost impossible to last. But the reality that the Chinese were able to help broker something like that is a sign of shifting alliances and allegiances in Iran. I think one of the things that could be done as the United States government articulate, this is what we would do with the next government of Iran. And this is not talking about regime change, but this is talking and giving support to the Iranian people about how, this is the beef is with the Iranian government, not the Iranian people. But as long as the Iranians are continuing to kill Americans, as long as the Iranians are still going to kill their own people, as long as the Iranians are pushing down, the rebellions like what happened with Masa Amini, negotiating with them on a deal and giving them anything in response is absolutely terrible. And so that's how I would be approaching it. And again, you need regional support in order to address this problem. But we also need to be talking about, here is what an end game would look with a rational Iranian government that's willing to engage and be a player in the rest of the world.
Right. Well, we are right at time, believe it or not. And I do want to respect, Will, your time. That we just really thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We know you're a busy guy running for president. You got to be sort of all over the place at once. So thank you very much for being with us. Just a couple notes for this group. Our next town hall will be with Vice President Pence next Tuesday at 6 p.m. So you can sign up for that one, and we'll do it with him next week. And again, I will just say on behalf of Will Hurd here, I've donated to him. I hope you will too. I think we need voices like his on the debate stage, even if you, as he was saying, even if you don't consider yourself a Republican these days or a Republican first in any stretch of the imagination. What matters is the conversation in our country. And these are the types of conversations and the types of voices that need to be on that stage, pushing back against Trumpism and all of the lies that come from, honestly, him and some of the other candidates. But Will, that's my last plug. I'll let you finish with any other comments you have for the group, and then we will adjourn.
Look, I don't want to I want to be mindful of everybody's time, but a quick story. I'll try to tell it quickly. I was in Pakistan. 90,000 people were killed, and I'm up in northern Pakistan trying to figure out how we can be helpful. We needed some airlift, and there was a village about 200 people that had been without food, water, power. We go pick them up, and this village elder had a little girl, about 6 or 7 years old. She lost both her mother and father in this earthquake, and he hands her to me, and I'm holding this little girl. She's screaming, she's crying. We take off. About halfway through the trip, she relaxes, and when we land in our destination, I put the little girl down. She takes about 10 steps, turns around, comes back and gives me the greatest hug I've ever gotten, goes over the helicopter crew, kisses him on the hand, and he pats her on the head, gives her a thumbs up, and she returns the gesture, and she runs away. This little girl's face is seared into my brain. Because on that day, the United States of America was the only government that had the willingness and the resources to help people, even if they're 6,000 miles away. And it's a reminder that the American government and the United States of America has become an exceptional nation, not because of what we have taken, but because of what we have given. And when we remember that, we're going to make sure this experiment goes on for another 247 years. Heath, thank you for your time. For everybody here, thank you for caring. You're all the ones that make me excited about doing this task. We got a long way to go, a short time to get there, but with folks like y'all, we're gonna be able to pull it off. So thank y'all.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks.